Elizabethan Theatre. So, in terms of Elizabethan Theatre, this is all part of something you can mention in the Golden Age, but you could get a question about it on its own. So, rich and poor liked to visit the theatre. All the classes liked to visit the theatre. It wasn't just for the nobility and the gentry. And the playwriters like Shakespeare and Marlowe became absolutely massive during the Elizabethan time. And in terms of it, they actually couldn't keep up with demand. So there was a group called the Lord Chamberlain's Men that was set up, and what they needed to happen was to get some purpose-built theatres, because originally the Lord Chamberlain's Men would just go around from place to place and just do their, plays in the taverns, in the backyards of taverns and things like that. So they really needed somewhere to be able to do these professionally. And they also were looking for a patron to actually help them to make, the theatres. So this was a person who would provide some money for them to be able to obviously, do the plays and things and take it out to a wider audience. And actually, just out of interest, Robert Dudley became one of these. So the Earl of Leicester became a patron, and put some money into theatres during the Elizabethan era. So it was a male profession, and as you know, when I taught you it, there's absolutely no doubt that women were not allowed to act in this era. Okay, so even if it was a part like Juliet, Romeo and Juliet, it should be a boy playing Juliet, and usually it was a young boy whose voice hadn't broken. That's how it worked. And at the beginning of the Elizabeth I's reign, all of the plays were not done in theatres because there was no purpose-built theatres. But by the end of the reign, theatres completely existed. So performances usually began at 3 p.m, okay, and needed to because there were open-air theatres, so they needed the lights. It was always difficult in terms of lighting up the theatre when it got dark, so they always did it during the day. And prices varied depending on whether you were sat or stood. Okay, so if you were stood up and you were in the pit where the peasants would be standing, then it was much cheaper. If obviously you were up in the higher areas, then it was much more expensive. There was lots of heckling and pushing and shoving, so it wasn't very easy to be an actor because people weren't particularly well behaved. And the rich and poor could enjoy the same performances, so they would all go in there together. Some people saw the theatre as sinful, especially the Puritans. They were totally against it. They really did think it was just out of control. And it had to be built actually on the other side of the River Thames because they were worried about it outside the city walls, because they were worried about crime and things coming from the theatres. They thought also it could spread disease, so that's another reason it was put outside the city walls. And the Puritans wanted the theatres actually closed down. They were that concerned about it. Elizabeth I also enjoyed the plays, but she usually saw them at the royal court. So the group of plays, the troops of plays, that's what they're called. A group of men that would go and do the plays would go to the royal court to do that for Elizabeth I. And as I say, they had travelling troops that would go around, and it would usually be about 4 or 5 actors that would be involved in that. So Robert Dudley helped provide funding for one of them, and I say that is obviously strange because we know that he would usually, he's a Puritan, so be against it, but he was interested in the theatre. And the Red Lion was the first one to be built in 1567, followed by the Rose in 1587, and then the Globe was built in 1599. Now the Globe was built by the Lord Chamberlain's Men, and this was like Shakespeare's, theatre company, so they did his plays. And it usually accommodated around about 3,000 spectators, and it was 3 stories high. So it went with the Great Chain of Being. So you'd get the peasantry at the bottom, then the obviously gentry, then the nobility, and so on as you move up the building. The Lord's Room was pretty expensive to sit in. That was like 5 pence, and the pits were like 1 pence. So that's how it worked. And it had an open top roof, so the problem was obviously if it got wet, then the people would be getting wet. That was how it worked. And there was always a flag put up to show a performance was going to take place that day. So people then would rush at that time to then pay some money so then they could go and watch the performance. So that's what you could talk about in terms of, if you got one, about the Elizabethan Theatre. Plenty of things to write about there.